Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you guys are new here, my name is Nkenna. I am responsible for everything that goes on here. As you guys can tell from the title of today's video, I'm going to be talking about the typical day in the life of a CNA. Just to give you guys a little bit of background, I started working as a CNA, patient care technician, PCT, PCA, whatever you want to call it. I started working as that in February. I got hired in January and I started working in February. I work in a level 1 trauma center and I work on 2 different floors, but primarily 1 floor. The 2 floors that I kind of fluctuate between are a cardiac med-surg floor and a forensics floor. So to go ahead and get right into what a day entails, this should be fresh on my mind because I literally just got off work. I was at work from 6:45 to 7:15. So the shifts overlap and it works out pretty nicely if you are on time, because then you have time to get report from the evening tech and then you can, relieve them, get report if it spills over. It just gives you time to prep yourself and get ready. So once 7 o'clock hits, then you're already kind of, getting in the flow of things. Whereas it's 7 o'clock and then it takes you till 7:30, 7:45 to get caught up. Typically, once I get to work, of course, I clock in, come in, get report from the evening tech, just find out if anything changed. So for me, I worked today and then I worked yesterday. So things didn't really change. 2 of my patients discharged. So I went from having 13 patients to having 11 patients, but I had all the same patients. So there was nothing different. So once I do get report, that evening tech goes home. I primarily work days, but we'll see how that changes once school starts. Once I've gotten report, then I go ahead and start bagging up ice. I just go to the ice machine, bag up ice, and pass ice to all of my patients, but I wait to do this until I'm ready to do my vitals. So once I've gotten report and I bag up all my ice, then next I'm just gonna go ahead and prep my materials and everything for the day. I typically grab a cart. There's a cart that I have and I just line it with the towel. I put wipes, I put gowns, I put beddings, anything, extra gloves, things like that. Anything that people typically ask for. People typically ask for like extra socks, can I have toothbrush and toothpaste, things like that that I know people are gonna ask for, so I'm not running up and down the hallway trying to get stuff. I have it on the cart, it's with me. I just step outside, get it for them, and bring it to them. So I'm just making one trip. And I also put my ice on that cart. In the mornings, I don't have to take blood sugars because the evening tech had checked the blood sugars, but typically we check them before meals. So in the 12-hour time period that I am on my shift, I'm checking blood sugars at 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. Unless somebody is Q6, so I'm checking their blood sugar every 6 hours, and then I have somebody that I check their blood sugar at noon, and then I check it at 6 p.m. So once I get oriented and have everything ready, I go ahead and do my vitals, and basically vitals entail, taking the blood pressure, taking the temperature, getting the heart rate, and then measuring the pulse ox. And we have on our Dynamap machines, the machine that we, roll around with us, then you scan the wristband and it automatically uploads it to the charting system that we use, and we use Epic. So I just do all that, scan my clinician ID, scan their barcode, identification barcode on their wristband, and then once everything's done, I just hit save and it sends it straight to the computer. So I make my rounds, and typically, depending on how many patients I have, then it takes me anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, and depending on what people are asking for, it might take a little bit longer. I always like to take an extra sheet of paper with me just in case something happens. If somebody asks for something, I don't have it on the cart, I know to come back and do it. Or maybe somebody wants to get washed up, so I have to remember, okay, this room number wants to, get washed up today, or this person wants me to bring them an extra pair of socks, anything like that. And then also it's nice to have, because if I need to record intakes and outputs, then, if patient in room 2 put out 600 cc's of urine, then I can write that down on my piece of paper and then chart it once I get back to my desk. So once I'm done with that, I'm relatively free. I mix it up. Blood sugars at 11 and 3 on my shift, and then I take vitals at, my vitals are due by 8, 12, and 4. So I start my vitals at 7, I'm usually done by 8, and then same thing, I start at 11, I'm usually done by noon, and start by 3, and I'm usually done by 4. So when I'm doing the blood sugars at 11, then I just go ahead and start doing my vitals, take everything with me, and once it's done, then I've knocked it all out. For my floor, we do hourly rounding, so even if that just means, going in the room, peeking your head in, making sure you see chest rise and fall, making sure your patient's still alive, asking, do you need anything? Are you okay? Are you good? It's just that kind of thing. You also want to make sure that you're repositioning your patients every 2 hours, so that's, turning your patients so that they don't develop pressure ulcers, and they don't have any skin breakdown. Make sure that you're monitoring for that. In terms of becoming a patient care technician, it took me 4 weeks. I did an accelerated program. It was on weekends. That was the only thing that worked with my schedule in terms of school. I'll say that the last weekend and a half were clinicals, and then the first portion was all textbook classroom work. We did have to take a state board exam that you have to sit for separately. We didn't take it in our class. We had to schedule it. Our professor had to put in our information, and we had to pay for the exam. Depending on what unit you're working on, your unit will train you. So being on the med surgical floor, I started orienting there, and then I went to the forensics unit. However, there are people who work on a variety of floors, and of course, you know, you go to orientation for the hospital, but they teach you further training depending on what floor that you're working on. So at the hospital that I work at, if I'm on the forensics floor that day, typically we only need one tech. So if there are 2 techs scheduled, then they will float you to another floor. So you might go to like the neuro ICU. You could go anywhere. They'll float you anywhere that they're short staffed in the hospital. I really like this idea. I know somebody that trained me had told me that they're in the float pool at Emory Hospital. And as the name would suggest, with float pool, you get to work anywhere in the hospital. So I think that's pretty cool because it helps you, especially if you're somebody who's trying to go into nursing school, decide what kind of field you want to get into instead of having to wait for clinicals or just kind of blindly deciding. It gives you a little more time to think, okay, I really like this or I don't like this at all. In my downtime, once everything is done, I've changed linens, I've emptied out, you know, my dirty linen, taken it to soiled utility, I've run errands for everybody. Then in my downtime, because I'm not taking classes this summer, I've just been reading books or applying to scholarships. So that's what I do in my downtime. I typically maybe have like a good solid like hour, 2 hours of like solid downtime where like nobody really needs anything, and we don't have a secretary on my floor. I answer the phone, so if somebody needs something, I go get it and, you know, come back to what I was doing. In order to be a CNA / patient care technician, you do need to have your BLS certification. So I did it on a Saturday. It took 1 hour. It was just me. It was one-on-one, and it was super easy. It was $60. It was awesome. I did it before I got the job, so I just had it on file, and it turns out that I actually need it for school. So it worked out really well. I've basically gotten my money's worth. You are required to work a minimum of 8 hours within a calendar year in order to keep your license active. Your license is valid for 2 years, but it's definitely good if you're in a transition period, just kind of trying to figure out if you do want to go to nursing school. It's good. You have it for 2 years, and hopefully in that time you can kind of, you know, get a feel for, this is something that I really want to do, or I don't think I want to do this. And as mentioned before, it's great for hands-on experience. I've learned so much. It's crazy in just the 6 months, 5 to 6 months that I've worked there. Going back to things of a typical day, sometimes I'll have to bathe a patient, sometimes I'll have to feed a patient. Like if you have a patient that had, you know, history of a stroke and they have left-sided weakness, then, you know, they may not have the same motor skills to hold a fork or a spoon, so you may have to feed someone. So typically I'll do my vitals, do my rounds, and then once I'm done with that, come back, feed that patient, sit, spend some time so I know that everything else is done and I'm not falling behind. In terms of intakes and outputs, it is basically like how it sounds. If you drink 800 cc's or 800 milliliters of water, then you record patient drank 800 milliliters of water, and it helps the attendings and the nurses kind of see like, okay, this person's putting out a lot of fluid, but they're not taking a lot, or they're taking in a lot of fluid and they're retaining it. They're not putting out anything. So that's just something that I have to monitor. I'll have to empty urinals, I'll have to empty Foleys. There was one patient that they are having GI problems and they were vomiting, and it's basically bile. So I would measure it out and it would be 650 cc's. So I would record like they had one emesis occurrence and it was 600 cc's, so that, you know, the physician can see like they're throwing up everything, they're not keeping anything down. So it's really good to, as I said, keep an extra piece of paper and be able to write that down so that you can accurately document. And then also another part of a typical day is doing daily care. So if you have a patient that wears dentures, you do denture care, you make sure you document that, you brush the dentures. If you give somebody a bath, you do that. If you did catheter care, you would document that. I think I said, if you bathe somebody, you'll mention that. Just different things along that line. I also perform EKGs, so sometimes they will order a stat EKG, and I will go up to the telemetry floor, which also happens to be the cardiac med-surg floor. I'll get the EKG machine, roll it on down to the forensics floor if I'm on that floor, and I will perform a 12-lead EKG, print it out, file it away where it needs to go, show it to my nurse, show it to the attending, and that's that. It's really cool. I do struggle to read EKGs. I want to learn how to read them because I look at them and I'm just like, I don't know what this says. Things that we try to remember on a shift are potty, pain, and position. So make sure you're getting people to the restroom if they have to go, asking people what is their pain level, making sure that they're pain-free as possible within my limit of or scope of practice. And then you're repositioning your patients every 2 hours. I'm also checking safety rails. I don't want to put all 4 rails up because then that's considered a restraint. So just making sure that the patient, if they can ambulate, if they can walk around, then they're able to, and they're not restrained in their bed, or they're trying to climb out of their bed and then it's causing a fall. Another thing that I also have to document in terms of charting, I do a lot of charting. They made a joke at orientation, if you don't chart it, it never happened. I also, like, let's say like a patient hasn't eaten in 3 days. I also have to chart, like, there's a portion in the chart that says like PO, so that's intake by mouth, and then you put like percent of meal that they ate. So I had a patient today that only ate 25% of his meal, but then he was consuming a lot of fluids. So that's something that I have to note. You know, some people get supplements, so we give patients Ensure supplements. So he drank 100% of the Ensure supplement. I put that he drank, I think, however many cc's, not a percentage, how many cc's that he drank. So I'm just documenting also so that they can see, like, this person's not eating a lot, this person's eating a lot. I do weights, I do heights. I make sure that I do that, and typically we do those every 24 hours. Very rarely will I have to do it on day shift, a weight, but sometimes, like maybe night shift didn't get it, and I'll get a weight in the morning when I come in. But pretty much that is the day in the life of a patient care technician. I'm pretty sure that covered everything. I hope this gives you guys some insight as to what I do. It's a really chill job. I learn a lot. It's really awesome. Some nurses, you know, you'll get really cool with them and they'll teach you how to do things. They'll show you things. One nurse, I mean, it's not anything major, but she was like, you know, she lets me discontinue her IVs. So, you know, it's really cool to be able to learn new things. So once I get to school, like, I'll be like, oh, I know how to do that. And it's really awesome. Also, some more things, I stock everything. So I'll go to Central Supply, and if there's not something, then I will get it from there. Or if I'm out of anything, like the pitchers that we give to patients that we put the ice in, or the single stick needles for AccuChecks for checking blood sugars. If there's something that they don't normally keep on the floor, I'll go get it. Things like bedside commode, I'll get that from Sterile Processing, which is also in Central Supply. Just things like that. I stock the floor, make sure we have it. If they order a 24-hour urine on a patient, or if they order just a regular urine sample, or if I have to pick up blood from the blood bank, I'm going to get that. If, for example, I have a patient who is breastfeeding but the baby is in the NICU, then I'm taking the breast milk to NICU and giving it to the nurses there, things like that. But yeah, hopefully that helped you guys, give you guys an overview of what a typical day is like.
To the question, I don't know it. I just wanna love you, just to make you smile. That's the motive. Just to make